So, in 1964, the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Right, which is, the absolute highest honor any writer can receive.
Exactly. It's the pinnacle. And he refused it.
He just flat out turned it down.
Yeah, he turned it down because he basically believed that accepting a label, even this incredibly prestigious one, it destroys human freedom. Like, he completely refused to let an institution define who he was.
It's such a radical move.
Right. And then 50 years later, a pop star stood on a stage in front of, I think, 70,000 screaming fans in a packed stadium and executed the exact same philosophical principle.
Which sounds completely wild when you first hear it.
It does.
Well,
But today, we are tearing down this thick, soundproof wall between the glittering world of stadium pop and the smoke-filled, anxiety-ridden cafes of 20th century existentialism. Welcome to the deep dive.
I am so excited for this one. It is an incredible juxtaposition because, we usually treat those two environments as mutually exclusive, right?
100%.
You have the visceral, vibrating, pyrotechnic escapism of a 3-minute pop anthem on one hand, and then on the other, you have the rigorous, silent, academic contemplation of existence.
Yeah, they don't exactly seem like they belong at the same dinner party.
No, but the text we are diving into today argues that this separation is, well, it's a complete illusion.
I have to admit, when I first saw the document we're looking at today, I genuinely thought it was a joke.
A lot of people do, yeah.
Because, okay, we are unpacking an excerpt from a book titled We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, Sartre Meets Taylor Swift.
It is quite the title.
And it is authored under this highly enigmatic pseudonym. It's Yu Chao, which translates from Taiwanese Mandarin as mouse-colored cat.
Great, the mouse-colored cat.
And right out of the gate, I am skeptical. You hear a title like that, and you think, okay, this is just a clever mashup. A stunt to sell books to college students.
Sure, it sounds like a gimmick.
Yeah, like, is there actually substance here, or are we just intellectualizing a really basic breakup song?
Well, that skepticism is exactly where the author wants you to start. The mission of this deep dive isn't to force a quirky gimmick, nor is it to somehow prove that Taylor Swift is secretly drafting philosophy syllabi in her spare time.
That would be amazing, though.
It would be, but that's not the point. The text is trying to uncover how the anxieties of pop culture, the breakups, the very public heartbreaks, the rumors, they actually mirror the exact same philosophical debates that have haunted human history.
We're talking about identity, absolute freedom, power.
Exactly. But let's be real. If you are listening to this right now, you probably had the exact same reaction the host did.
A little chuckle, right? A smirk.
Yeah, the smirk. It feels inappropriate.
It really does. It feels like, I don't know, someone wearing neon running shoes to a black tie academic gala. You just don't put a stadium pop singer and a founding father of existentialism in the same sentence.
But why? Why is that smirk our default reaction?
Right. Why do we get defensive about philosophy?
The author actually addresses that exact smirk in the preface.
Yeah.
And to understand why we react that way, the text pulls in the work of Pierre Bourdieu.
Okay, remind me. He's the French sociologist.
Yes, a French sociologist who wrote a landmark book in 1979 called Distinction. And Bourdieu's core argument is that our tastes, what we decide is high culture deserving serious contemplation versus what we dismiss as low culture or just mere entertainment.
Right.
It actually has almost nothing to do with actual intellectual depth.
Wait, really?
Yeah, Bourdieu says it is fundamentally a mechanism for social sorting.
Social sorting, okay. Meaning we use the art we consume as like a weapon to prove we belong to a certain class.
Exactly.
Like, I listen to complex classical music or read dense philosophy. Therefore, I am intellectually superior to the person listening to top 40 radio on their commute.
Precisely. Bourdieu argued that society is basically a landscape where people are constantly fighting for status. And you signal your status through what he called cultural capital.
Cultural capital. So it's like a Rolex you wear on your brain.
That is a great way to put it. High culture isn't inherently more profound. It just requires a specific kind of education and background to access, which is what makes it exclusive. So prestige circulates with credentials.
Okay.
But pop culture circulates with playlists.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah.
If 70 million people understand a song, it completely loses its value as a status symbol.
Right.
You can't use it to elevate yourself above the crowd if the crowd is singing the exact same words right next to you.
Exactly. Pop culture is treated with suspicion by the academic elite, not because it lacks complexity, but because it spreads too widely. It is democratic.
Yeah, it's accessible to everyone.
And this is where the author of our text makes an incredibly rebellious claim. The author states, and I quote, "To simplify is to flatten. To translate is to risk. And risk, unlike prestige, is democratic."
Wow, that feels like a direct attack on academia.
Oh, it absolutely is.
They are basically saying that keeping philosophy locked up in dense, inaccessible jargon isn't about protecting the purity of the ideas, it's about protecting the prestige of the professors.
Yes. The beating heart of this entire project is the phrase, "clarity is not betrayal."
Clarity is not betrayal.
I love that. Stripping away the jargon and looking at the raw, visceral concepts, that is true fidelity to the ideas. The author is flattening the artificial hierarchy of academia. They're asking us to sit Sartre and Switch at the same table and just wait to see who spills first.
Okay, I am tracking with the sociological argument. We shouldn't dismiss pop culture just because it's popular.
Great.
But the author takes a really bizarre route to actually blend these two worlds.
Yeah.
Because before we even get to the lyrics or the philosophy, we are presented with a piece of historical fiction.
Yes, the fake forward.
Yeah, a fake imagined forward titled Taylor's Way Dash Apocryphal.
It is such a striking literary device.
It really is. It's written from this imagined Taylor's perspective at 2 a.m., and just to be crystal clear to everyone listening, the author explicitly notes this was not written by Taylor Swift.
Wait, it's entirely an invention.
It's an invention. But I found myself wondering, why do this?
Yeah.
Like, what does putting words into her mouth achieve that a straight, normal analysis of the song wouldn't?
Well, it establishes the emotional stakes of the entire book right off the bat.
How so?
By inventing this internal monologue, the author forces us to confront the pathologizing of female adolescence.
Oh, pathologizing.
In this imagined forward, the character reflects on how, for years, her feelings were dismissed by critics as being too much.
Right. Her anger was too loud.
Her heartbreak was too frequent. Her lyrics were too calculated. She was told she wrote frivolous songs for teenage girls.
Which effectively dismisses an entire demographic as emotionally invalid.
Exactly.
The character in the foreword says, let me find it. As if adolescence wasn't the time when you feel the world with the violence of a summer storm.
Such a powerful line.
That line literally stopped me in my tracks. We treat teenagers, especially young women, as if their intense emotions are just, I don't know, manufactured drama.
Hormones, right?
Right.
Just trivial stuff.
Right. But if you actually remember being that age, adolescence is the exact moment you realize you are going to die one day.
Yes.
It's when you ask the most terrifying, foundational questions about time, memory, identity, and loss.
And the text asks a really vital question here. Who gets to be called a philosopher?
Oh, that's good.
The foreword suggests that the questions that keep a teenager awake at night are structurally identical to the questions that built Western philosophy.
Like, why does the memory of a scarf left in a drawer weigh more heavily than an entire decade?
Exactly. Or are we defined by the people who love us or by the ones who leave us behind?
I love the moment where the imagined Taylor finds comfort in this realization, discovering that her sleepless nights over a toxic relationship might actually resemble Søren Kierkegaard's theories of dread.
Or Friedrich Nietzsche's anxieties about eternal return. The ghosts that haunt our hallways actually have university degrees.
Yeah, the text says, your tears are ink, your doubts are philosophy. It is just a massive validation of the intensity of youth.
And we cannot gloss over the fantastic little Easter egg dropped at the very end of that apocryphal foreword.
Oh, the Kant thing.
Yes. The imagined Taylor signs off by casually mentioning, apparently Kant loved the bridge in Cruel Summer.
They made me laugh out loud when I read it. Immanuel Kant, the 18th century German philosopher. But, okay, explain why that joke works for us. Why Kant, specifically?
So Immanuel Kant wrote extensively about the concept of the sublime.
The sublime, okay.
For Kant, the sublime is an experience of overwhelming magnitude or power that momentarily crushes our ability to comprehend it.
So not just something pretty.
No, not just beautiful. Think of standing at the edge of a massive, terrifying cliff.
Yeah.
Or watching a violent hurricane.
It's all mingled with terror.
Exactly. Awe and terror. The joke here is that the mechanics of a great pop music bridge, you know, the swelling of the instrumentation, the sudden key change, the breathless crescendo of the vocal.
Yeah, that massive buildup.
They are engineered to induce that exact same feeling of the sublime.
So the sheer overwhelming intensity of a stadium pop bridge is basically just the modern sonic equivalent of Kant staring at a thunderstorm.
Precisely.
That is brilliant. But if adolescent heartbreak is the breeding ground for profound existential terror, who is the philosopher best equipped to explain the dizzying reality of having to choose who you were going to be.
Well, this is where we properly meet Jean-Paul Sartre. He is the architect of total unrelenting freedom.
In the end of the hour.
And the source provides a rather blunt biographical sketch to help us understand his mindset. He was born in Paris in 1905, and he lost his father when he was just 15 months old.
Which the text points out was actually a weirdly positive thing for his ego, right?
Strangely.
Like because he grew up with a grandfather who worshipped him, who treated him like an absolute prodigy. The text notes that Sartre spent the rest of his life trying to prove his grandfather right.
His self-perception is the key to his entire worldview. Sartre described himself as small, ugly, and cross-eyed. He recognized very early on that he lacked conventional physical attractiveness. So he made a conscious, deliberate choice.
What did he do?
He decided that his path to seduction, his method of conquering the world, would be through raw, undeniable, overwhelming intelligence.
And it worked. I mean, he became the most famous intellectual of the 20th century. He was constantly surrounded by this chaotic orbit of disciples, enemies, lovers.
It absolutely worked. So the intellectual conquest culminates in 1943. He drops what the text calls an existentialist bombshell with his massive book, Being and Nothingness.
Okay, Being and Nothingness.
And the core tenet of this intimidatingly thick book boils down to 3 words.
Lay it on me.
Existence precedes essence.
Existence precedes essence. Now, we need to break this down clearly, because if the listener doesn't grasp this, the entire Taylor Swift connection falls apart.
Definitely. Let's look at the historical context first. For centuries, philosophers and theologians believed the exact opposite. They believed essence precedes existence.
Okay, so essence first.
Think of a manufactured object like a paper knife. Before the paper knife physically exists, a craftsman has an idea of it.
Right.
The idea, its essence, its purpose to cut paper, exists in the mind of the creator before the object is ever made.
And for a long time, humanity applied that same logic to ourselves.
Exactly.
The idea was that God, or fate, or nature, had a plan for you before you were born. You were designed with a specific purpose. So your essence preceded your physical existence.
Correct. But Sartre, as an atheist and an existentialist, flips that entirely upside down.
Right.
He argues that for human beings, existence comes first. You simply appear on the earth, you exist.
So you just show up.
You are born into this world with no pre-written destiny, no fundamental human nature, and no divine blueprint. You are just here as a blank slate. And then through your choices, your actions, and your decisions, you create your essence.
Okay, I have an analogy for this. It's like being handed a complex Lego set, but there's no picture on the box.
Oh, I like that.
And there's no instruction manual. You don't know if you're supposed to be building a spaceship or a castle. You can build whatever you want, which sounds incredibly liberating.
It does sound freeing.
But honestly, the more I think about it, the more deeply paralyzing it feels.
Yeah.
Like, if there's no picture on the box, how do I know if I'm doing it right?
Well, Sartre would say that paralysis is the exact correct response.
Really?
He explicitly called it a terrifying freedom. Because if we have no pre-written user manual, if there's no fate guiding our hands, then we have absolutely no excuses.
Oh.
Every single action is a choice.
So you can't say, well, that's just how I am.
No.
Or I was born this way. You can't blame your parents or the alignment of the stars or the devil making you do it.
Precisely. You are completely, terrifyingly responsible for everything you do and everything you are. The text reminds us that Sartre spent his life saying, we are condemned to be free.
Condemned to be free. That is heavy.
It is not a joyous celebration of liberty. It is a crushing burden of responsibility.
And this brings us back to my hook at the very beginning of the show. In 1964, he refuses the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Right.
He is the only writer to ever voluntarily turn it down. I always thought that was just arrogance. But with this context, it makes perfect sense.
How so?
Well, accepting the prize would mean allowing the Nobel Committee to define his essence. It would freeze him into the role of Jean-Paul Sartre, Nobel laureate.
Yes.
He wanted to remain a free project, constantly evolving, rather than becoming a cultural monument.
It was the ultimate demonstration of his philosophy in action. He refused to let the gaze of an institution dictate who he was.
All right, so we are condemned to this terrifying absolute freedom. We are totally responsible for our lives, but human beings generally hate feeling that exposed. It's too heavy.
It is exhausting.
So naturally, we invent escape hatches. We look for coping mechanisms to pretend we aren't actually in control. And this leads us to Sartre's most devastating psychological concept.
And the exact trap that Taylor Swift is dissecting in her Era 4 music.
Let's get into it.
We are entering the territory of what Sartre called mauvaise foi, or bad faith.
Bad faith.
Bad faith is the act of lying to oneself to avoid the agonizing burden of choice. It is the elaborate daily performance we put on to convince ourselves and others that we are not actually free.
Okay, and the source gives the classic Sartrean example to explain this. The coffee shop waiter.
Yes, a famous example.
So Sartre was sitting in a Parisian cafe, just watching a waiter work, and he noticed something off about him.
Sartre observed that the waiter was moving just a little too sharply. He was holding his tray with slightly too much mechanical precision.
Like a robot.
Almost, yeah. He was bending forward a little too eagerly to take the order. Sartre realized the man wasn't just working as a waiter, he was playing the role of a waiter.
He was acting.
Yes, he was trying to embody the essence of a waiter the way a rock embodies the essence of a rock. By entirely throwing himself into this rigid, predictable role, the man was trying to deny his own terrifying freedom. He was trying to forget that at any moment he could just drop the tray, take off his apron, and walk out the door. He was in bad faith.
Now let's take that concept out of the 1940s Parisian cafe and apply it to modern romance.
Let's do it.
Let's apply it to a toxic relationship. What does bad faith sound like when your phone rings at 2 a.m. and it's your ex?
According to this text, bad faith sounds like, it's stronger than me.
Oh, I've heard that.
I can't control my feelings. We are just drawn to each other.
And the big one. It's complicated.
Yes. For Sartre, there is no such thing as it's complicated.
Really? None.
That phrase is a shield. You either choose to answer the phone or you refuse to choose. And refusing to choose, letting the situation just happen to you, is still a choice.
Okay, I am going to push back hard on this. I'm speaking on behalf of anyone listening who has ever given a relationship a second chance.
Fair enough.
Because life isn't binary. People do change, don't they? Isn't it actually a sign of emotional maturity to embrace nuance?
Well,
To look at a messy, complex situation and say, well, we'll see, or let's give it time and see if we can work it out. Calling it bad faith just feels incredibly rigid and unforgiving.
that exact defense is anticipated in the text. There is a brilliant section titled Dinner Conversation, where the author scripts a hypothetical argument between two characters, a snob and a Swiftie.
Okay.
The snob makes your exact point. The snob says, life is more nuanced than never ever. Getting back together isn't necessarily weakness, it's an acknowledgement of complexity.
Exactly. I am team snob on this one.
But the Swiftie responds by channeling pure Sartre and completely dismantles that argument.
Oh.
The Swiftie points out that invoking nuance is the ultimate trick of bad faith.
Wait, nuance is a trick. How is nuance a trick?
Because saying it's nuanced, or we'll see, is a highly sophisticated, socially acceptable way of avoiding a definitive decision. It gives you permission to passively drift back into a toxic dynamic while patting yourself on the back for being open-minded.
That is brutal.
The cycle of breaking up and getting back together over and over again is not a tragedy of fate, it is a performance.
Oh, wow. So you are pretending to suffer a fate that you are, in reality, actively choosing every single time you unlock the front door.
Precisely. The Swiftie in the dialogue says, Taylor has the courage to say, no, it's not complicated. I choose. Never.
Wow.
The snob tries to dismiss the song as just 3 minutes of teenage anger on repeat, but the Swiftie corrects them. Sartre wrote that repetitive behavior is a prime symptom of bad faith, but Taylor repeats the word never precisely to break that cycle.
That's a huge distinction.
She's not describing a breakup that happened in the past. The singing of the song is the execution of the breakup itself.
Okay, that distinction is massive. But before we get to how she executes the breakup, we need to understand what she is fighting against.
Right, the monster.
Yeah, if getting back together is the ultimate act of bad faith, what exactly represents the ultimate threat to our freedom? According to Sartre, the monster isn't an abstract cosmic force. The monster is the person standing on your porch ringing the doorbell.
And this brings us to arguably the most famous and definitely the most misunderstood quote Sartre ever wrote. It comes from his 1944 play, No Exit.
Okay, the famous quote. Let's hear it.
Hell is other people.
Hell is other people. People use that quote constantly, usually when they are stuck in gridlock traffic.
Or a crowded subway.
Yeah, or when someone cuts them in line at the grocery store. It's basically become a bumper sticker for people and annoying.
It has, but that completely misses the philosophical weight of what Sartre actually meant.
So what did he mean?
In the play No Exit, you have 3 deceased characters locked in a drawing room together for eternity.
Okay.
There are no pitchforks, no torturers, no fire and brimstone, just the 3 of them. And crucially, there are no mirrors in the room.
Oh, No mirrors.
Hmm.
So they can only see themselves through the reactions and the judgments of the other two people.
Exactly. And that is why hell is other people. The source clarifies that the gaze of others freezes us into an image.
Freezes us.
When someone looks at you, they turn you into an object in their world. They judge you, categorize you, and define you. If you accept their definition of you, you lose your subjectivity.
You lose your freedom.
Yes, you become the thing they see.
Okay, so let's apply this to the ex ringing the doorbell. How does the gaze of the ex turn into hell?
The text introduces the perspective of an academic character named Professor Malik Merriwell, who provides this incredibly dense but fascinating analysis.
What does Merriwell say?
Merriwell says we shouldn't look at the X as just an empirical individual. We shouldn't think of him as a specific guy named John or Jake. We should view the X as a structural attractor.
A structural attractor. That sounds like physics.
It is. It's a brilliant term borrowed from complex systems theory. It's a point of return around which indecision organizes itself.
Like a black hole.
Think of a black hole's gravitational pull, exactly. The X returning is hell, not because he's a mean person or a bad boyfriend. He is hell because his very presence tempts you to surrender your freedom.
Let me make sure I'm translating this correctly for the listener. Imagine your phone buzzing at 2 a.m. and you see their name on the screen.
Right.
The X is in hell because they are annoying. They are hell because they tempt you to play a pre-scripted role. When they look at you in their gaze, you are the one who forgives.
Yes.
You are the one who always comes back. You are the one who never dares to say never.
Yes, yes. If you let them in, if you answer that text, you are accepting that frozen image of yourself. You are trading the terrifying burden of total freedom for the comfortable, familiar script of the victimized lover.
Wow.
The X says, "Shall we try again?" And the overwhelming temptation is to say, "It's out of my hands, I still love him."
Which is bad faith.
That is the regime of bad faith Merriwell is talking about. You defer the burden of choice by re-entering a pre-scripted relational configuration. It's safe, even if it's painful.
The gravitational pull of that structural attractor is incredibly strong. Everyone listening has felt it. So how do you escape it?
That is the million-dollar question.
How do you break a cycle when everything in your emotional history and every societal pressure to be forgiving is pushing you to just say, we'll see?
According to the author, you have to execute a very specific, aggressive, performative act.
And that is where the song We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together comes into play.
Let's look at the mechanics of the chorus. The repetition is aggressive and absolute. We are never, ever, ever getting back together.
It's undeniably catchy.
As we mentioned, the snob dismisses this as a catchy necessity for a pop hit, but the author, channeling Sartre, argues this is an act of existential self-inscription.
Existential self-inscription. The text quotes the other character, Gaston Blunder, who completely strips all the romantic tragedy out of the song.
I love this quote.
He says, it's not romantic, it's administrative. You close the file and you don't reopen it. End of story. I am obsessed with that phrasing. Administrative. It entirely changes how you hear the song. It's not a tearful diary entry being read aloud. It's a legal decree.
Professor Merriwell details why the repetition of never is structurally necessary. It is a performative mechanism designed to interrupt what he calls recursive indeterminacy.
Recursive indeterminacy. So endless looping.
Right. This touches on speech act theory. When she sings the chorus, she isn't just describing an internal feeling she has in that particular moment. She is laboring to produce a boundary in the real world.
I remember learning about this in linguistics. It's called a performative utterance.
Exactly.
It's like when a judge hits a gavel and says, I sentence you to 5 years. Or a minister says, I now pronounce you husband and wife.
The words actually do the thing.
Right. The words don't describe a reality that already exists. The speaking of the words creates the new reality.
Precisely. By repeating never, she is rendering that boundary stable against the constant nagging temptation to reverse course.
If it's so tempting to backtrack.
Sartre talked endlessly about the gap between saying and being. It is incredibly easy to say, I'm done in a moment of anger, but actually being done, living in that finality, is much harder.
Oh, absolutely.
Merriwell argues that in the repetitive insistence of that pop chorus, the gap between saying and being is momentarily abolished. She is aggressively willing herself into a state of total closure.
The author includes a hilarious little multiple-choice quiz in the text called Who Wants to Win Nothing?
It's a fun little break in the text.
Yeah, it asks the reader, why does Taylor repeat the words never ever? Option A is because repetition reinforces emotional intensity. Option B is, she's trying to convince herself. Option D is, the producer knew the song needed a catchy chorus.
But option C is the key.
Right. Option C, which Mary Will says is the only correct answer, is because she is breaking the cycle of bad faith.
Option C is the philosophical truth hiding inside the shiny pop structure. The repetition operates as a discursive act that interrupts the oscillatory logic of indecision.
Wow.
It literally stops the pendulum from swinging back.
The Swiftie in the dinner conversation draws a brilliant line between Sartre and Swift here. They point out that Sartre saying no to the Nobel Prize and Swift saying never ever in front of 70,000 screaming fans are fundamentally the exact same gesture.
The exact same.
It is the act of saying no when every single societal expectation, every script demands that you say yes.
The wording changes, the medium changes, but the courage to assume the consequences of your own freedom is identical.
It's universal.
Sartre used stage plays to make existentialism accessible to the Parisian public. Swift uses stadium pop to make it accessible to millions. The scale is different, but the core philosophical assertion, I choose, therefore I am, is exactly the same.
Finally drive this home to make us visualize what this radical, isolating freedom looks like in practice. The author paints this incredibly vivid, almost surreal picture for us in a section called Unlikely Taxi Ride.
Yes.
And we absolutely have to talk about this because it's the most haunting, cinematic part of the entire excerpt.
It is a masterclass in atmospheric writing. The author sets the scene. An 8.7-kilometer Uber ride in New York City. The time is exactly 2:17 a.m.
Very specific.
Taylor Swift and Jean-Paul Sartre are sitting together in the back seat, and the text specifically notes, the city speaks, the driver does not.
It feels like an A24 indie film. Let's actually look at the dialogue because it is so incredibly tight. Sartre turns to her and says, "You say never as if it were simple." And Taylor replies, "It is simple. That's why people don't like it."
Brilliant.
Sartre observes, they prefer to say, "We'll see." And Taylor hits back with, "We'll see" is how you keep the door open without admitting you're afraid to close it.
That one line perfectly encapsulates everything we've just spent the last 20 minutes discussing about bad faith and nuance. We'll see is cowardice masquerading as patience.
Cowardice masquerading as patience. Wow.
Sartre acknowledges this, noting that bad faith almost always takes that form, and Taylor grounds it in our modern technological reality. She says, in my world, it takes the form of a text at 2 a.m.
So Sartre asks, and you do not answer. She says, I used to, and now. Now I write songs about not answering.
And then the text adds this brilliant stage direction.
Right. Silence. The car stops at a red light.
That red light is doing so much heavy lifting subtextually.
Fine.
They are in motion, moving through the dark, chaotic city, and suddenly they're forced to pause. It symbolizes that exact suspended moment of indecision we talked about earlier.
The structural attractor.
Yes. The structural attractor is pulling. The phone in her pocket is glowing with the 2 a.m. text from the ex. The light is red. What do you do?
Right.
Do you make an illegal U-turn and go back to the familiar? Or do you wait for the green light to move forward into the terrifying unknown?
During that pause at the red light, Sartre says, you understand that never defines you. Because if you cut off that path, if you close that door forever, you have to forge a completely new one. You have to become someone else entirely.
And she says, good.
Good. Sartre warns her, most people spend their lives avoiding that moment. And Taylor replies, most people don't have 70,000 witnesses when they say it.
Jules.
Then the light turns green. The car moves. Sartre says, that does not make it easier. And her final line, no, it just makes it louder.
If we dissect the subtext of this imagined conversation, it achieves something remarkable. It strips away all the glittering glitz of the pop stadium era.
Yeah, the costumes and the pyrotechnics.
And simultaneously, it strips away the dense, impenetrable academic jargon of the Parisian philosophical cafe. We are just left with two vulnerable people in the back of a car in the middle of the night, confronting the exact same human core.
It reminds you, the listener, that taking responsibility for your existence is ultimately a deeply lonely act.
Yes.
Even if you have 70,000 people screaming the words back at you in a stadium, the actual decision to close the file, the moment you internally stamp it, never ever happens in the quiet, terrifying solitude of your own mind. It's a shockingly loud act internally, even if the world only hears the pop hook.
Which brings us to a profound pivot at the end of the book.
Yes, the ending is wild.
This surreal crossing of paths, this blending of an existentialist icon and a modern pop superstar, isn't just an exercise in clever literary comparisons.
Right, there's a larger point.
The afterword reveals the author's true overarching motive for writing this entire collection. And it is a motive that goes far beyond music critique or mid-century philosophy.
Yeah, the afterword completely zooms out. It hits you with a much larger, almost sci-fi level cultural critique.
It does.
The author reveals that this whole project, pairing these disparate cultural figures, is deeply connected to a modern anxiety. The rise of large language models, artificial intelligence, and what they call algorithmic inbreeding.
The author describes a looming crisis of digital autophagy.
Digital autophagy.
Autophagy literally means self-devouring. They use an analogy to explain the shift. When digital image processing first emerged, the incredible promise was zero generation loss.
Right, you copy a file and it stays perfect.
Exactly. You could make a copy of a digital file, and then a copy of that copy, and a million copies later, the pixels remained absolutely pristine. Fidelity was infinite.
But with AI, it's different.
But with generative AI, we face a completely different, much more dangerous problem.
Right, because, let me make sure I understand the mechanics of this. AI models are trained by scraping the internet for data.
Yes.
But increasingly, the internet is being filled with text and images generated by those same AI models.
Exactly.
So the machines are beginning to feed on their own outputs. They're forming recursive loops. The author calls these models stochastic parrots of infinity that read everything and understand nothing.
That is the exact mechanism of digital autophagy. The danger is that as the AI feeds on itself, human thought becomes smoother, safer, and dangerously average with each iteration.
It's flattening everything out.
It produces endless conformity, not intelligence. Think about how an algorithm works. It will always give you the most statistically probable next word or the most expected cultural pairing.
Right, it's predictable.
If you ask an algorithm to group philosophers, it will naturally group Sartre with Camus or Simone de Beauvoir. If you ask it to group pop stars, it will group Swift with Selena Gomez or Ed Sheeran.
But it would never, ever group Sartre and Swift.
Never.
The algorithm fundamentally lacks the capacity for the absurd, intuitive human leap. It doesn't know how to smash two totally unrelated things together just to see what sparks fly.
And this is where the author introduces their core philosophical concept, capacitivism.
Capacitivism.
Capacitivism is presented as the antidote to digital autophagy. The entire goal of this Philo-Swift collection pairing, Swift's red scarf with Martin Heidegger's ontology, or matching her song Getaway Car with Machiavelli's political theory.
Which sounds insane.
It does. But the goal is to intentionally inject friction into the digital circuit. The machine can organize the data perfectly, but it cannot dare to make a conceptual leap.
The author calls this leap an act of intellectual vandalism.
Intellectual vandalism. I love that.
I love that imagery so much. It's like throwing a beautifully painted, completely illogical wrench into a perfectly oiled, incredibly boring machine. We don't reject the digital flow, we overload it.
Yes.
We introduce sparks that its training data cannot anticipate.
Yeah.
The text says there is no training data for what the author calls Wittgenstein in a slam door or Deleuze in lipstick.
By creating these absurd but profound connections, it forces the machine onto side roads. It breaks the predictable algorithmic paths. And if you think about it, this is precisely what true human agency looks like in the 21st century.
That connects so directly back to you, the listener, and your everyday life.
It really does.
We are all constantly consuming the algorithm's flow. Our social media feeds, our Netflix recommendations, our Spotify playlists, it's all perfectly predicting what we want based on our past behavior.
It's comfortable.
Right. In a way, the algorithm is an engine of bad faith.
Oh, that's a great point.
It assumes our essence is fixed by our previous clicks. But the author is telling us that true sovereignty tomorrow doesn't mean just unplugging your router and moving to the woods. It means being the one who bends the flow.
Sovereignty no longer lies in merely owning information, because the machine has all the information.
Right.
Sovereignty lies in disturbing its logic. It's about maintaining the deeply human, messy quirkiness required to create something an algorithm would never dare to assemble.
Which perfectly explains the author's own identity. The mouse-colored cat.
Yes, the mysterious author.
In the About the Author section, we don't get a standard bio. We get these tiny, bizarre details. Some rumors say he's a former programmer turned lawyer. Others say he's a philosopher thinking in silence between Brussels, Antwerp, and Krakow.
Very mysterious.
But the defining traits we are given are that he dislikes lukewarm water, he hates predictable arguments, and he has no patience for cats without ambition.
Cats without ambition. That's so funny.
The rest is just camouflage.
It takes a human, Or perhaps a highly ambitious mouse-colored cat to look at a stadium pop tour covered in glitter and see the rigorous legacy of French existentialism hiding in plain sight. It is a profoundly creative misbehavior.
Okay, let's take a breath and retrace the journey we've just been on,
Mm,
because we have covered a massive amount of ground today.
we really have.
We started by challenging the cultural snobbery of Pierre Bourdieu's distinction. We examined that smirk we all get when high philosophy and pop culture collide, and realized that separating them is really just about protecting academic status, not about the actual depth of the ideas. Clarity is not betrayal.
And from there, we dove into Sartre's terrifying concept of absolute freedom, the realization that existence precedes essence. Because we have no pre-written destiny and no instruction manual, we have absolutely no excuses for our choices. We are condemned to be free.
And because that freedom is so paralyzing, we invented the trap of bad faith. We examined the waiter playing the waiter and the lover playing the victim. We learned that hiding behind nuance, saying it's complicated or we'll see, is often just a cowardly way of avoiding the heavy burden of making a definitive choice.
It's an escape hatch.
Exactly. And we redefined the toxic exit the door. They aren't just an annoying memory, they are a structural attractor, a gravitational pull tempting you back into a frozen, pre-scripted version of yourself.
Finally, we arrived at the performative act of the song itself. Repeating never ever isn't a petty tantrum. It is an administrative closing of the file. It is the arduous, necessary process of abolishing the gap between saying and being, interrupting recursive indeterminacy, and finally assuming the consequences of your own freedom.
The ultimate takeaway here is that your deepest, most intense moments of heartbreak, frustration, or adolescent angst are entirely worthy of rigorous philosophical examination. Tears are ink, and doubts are philosophy.
And as we navigate a world increasingly smoothed over by algorithmic conformity, where machines feed on their own average outputs, maybe the most human thing you can do is to act like an intellectual vandal,
Yes.
to bend the flow, to introduce friction, and to refuse the predictable scripts handed to you, whether by a machine, by a toxic X, or by society itself.
Sartre and Swift are both arguing that sometimes you have to force the binary. You have to draw a hard line in muddy waters to protect your freedom.
Beautifully said.
So I want to leave you with a final thought, something to chew on today.
Hmm.
If existence truly precedes essence, and you are defined entirely by the choices you make in the present,
Right.
what is a repetitive on-again, off-again cycle in your own life? Maybe it's a relationship, sure. But maybe it's a toxic job you keep complaining about, but never leave.
Or a habit.
Yeah, maybe it's a self-destructive habit or a limiting mindset you keep returning to because even though it hurts, it's comfortable. Where in your lives are you secretly relying on the excuse of it's complicated? Or we'll see, just to avoid the terrifying burden of being free. What is the file in your life that you finally need the courage to stamp never ever and close for good?